Welcome back to another episode in our Rebuilding Mum and Dad series, following my parents' progress after they started strength training in their 80s to protect their health and independence. In my mum's case, she's aiming to walk longer distances unaided again because she struggles to hold her back up without support. Previous episodes are linked below, and the response to the last one showing how far they'd come in just the first 8 weeks was so heartwarming, and it also prompted a lot of questions, including whether it's safe for people like my mum with osteoporosis or osteopenia to lift weights. So today I'm talking to my parents' strength coach, Chris Reis, who's also a physical therapist with a lot of experience in helping older people regain muscle mass and strength. He's head coach with the Starting Strength Gym in Cincinnati, and we first spoke after I spotted him on social media coaching 98-year-old Merce Hershey, who improved her bone density through weight training. My parents watched my interview with Chris, and afterwards all three of us said we wanted to try barbell training, which is the type of strength training Chris believes in because it allows us to work several different muscle groups at the same time and use microweights to build very gradually. Also, we got a lot of people asking how they can make a start and whether there are any conditions that rule people out from getting stronger. So today, Chris is answering those questions, and be sure to subscribe and check back with us for more updates on the difference my parents are seeing in their day-to-day lives through weight training as they gain new strength with each passing session. And as a little snapshot, here's my mum telling me during our recent workout about how 3 months into training, something happened that made her realise just what a difference to her back it's making.
Well, when I first get up in the morning, I feel I want to be straight. So I walk to the shower and washed my hair like this. Instead of like this. I can only normally lift my back very short periods. Few minutes, and
it was longer today.
I did maybe 5.
So with that little bit of good news from my mum, here's Coach Chris Reis with the answers to your questions around safety and how we can start to get stronger at any age. Chris, there has been a big response to the most recent video that I shared on my parents' strength training progress, just showing what could be achieved and they've achieved in a couple of months. A lot of people saying how inspired they are just to see that and to see that you can make progress at that stage in life. And also, in quite a few cases, people being surprised to learn that this is something we can and probably should be taking on in later life. I mean, you've seen quite a lot of the comments. What did you make of the response?
I think it's fantastic. I think it's great that we're getting this kind of message out, the importance of strength, the potential for anybody to get stronger. I love to hear your parents talk about the way, especially your mom, talk about how everyday life stuff got easier simply by getting stronger. We talk about this all the time. Being in the gym, some people really enjoy that. Most people don't. So it's just great to hear her, unprompted, unbiased, feedback on how things like travel and going to do something you enjoy gets more enjoyable and easier when you're stronger. The message often is that we're very frail and that we're on the verge of catastrophic injury. And so, you've been diagnosed with osteopenia, osteoporosis. In your mind, you're just one wrong move away from a catastrophic fracture. And yes, there's increased risk, but what we're doing is a very methodical process. We start light, we progress gradually. The risk for injury because you're osteopenic or something like that is minimal. We have people in our gyms all the time with those conditions, and under the right program with the right loading protocol, it's extremely safe and it will reverse it. I'm a physical therapist, right? I think our profession is guilty of a lot of this. People will say, well, I've tried strengthening and it didn't work for me. And strengthening was in a physical therapy office with a green band doing 3 sets of 10. That doesn't make anybody stronger unless you've been in a coma for 6 months, right? There's got to be significant loading and it's got to be progressively heavier. And so when strength training is done correctly, it always works. Every single time. If you're alive, it will work. There are, of course, exceptions with extreme neurological conditions, but by and large, if you're alive and you're walking around, you can get stronger. And so, again, I think that people are surprised because there are a lot of those misconceptions, and the assumption would be, well, if you're in your 80s, you really can't get that much stronger. You just are where you are, and that's just how your life goes, and it's just couldn't be further from the truth. Your parents are two great examples of, the strength training program is applied correctly. Everybody gets stronger. It's our physiology, it's our DNA, whether you want to or not. If you show up and do a little bit more weight than last time, everybody gets stronger.
Yeah. And I think probably the real positive with my parents is that we have been following them from the start. So normally, if we are seeing somebody who's made progress at an unusual stage in life, we're seeing the end result.
Sure.
We just have to imagine for ourselves how that started off. Whereas this is really, I think we could see that my mum was pretty frail at the start of the year. And I had a lot of people when I first shared that they were doing this saying, should your mum really be doing that? Is she not too frail to be picking up those weights?
Right.
I did just want to touch on safety and mention a couple of conditions, because people will have heard what you said there, but they'll think, oh, but I've got this specific issue that applies to a lot of people. So I just wanted to put a couple of scenarios to you.
Sure.
People with chronic illness, somebody said, I'm in acute pain 24/7. My knees are very bad. I have arthritis. I have severe muscle spasms. I've had somebody else say I've got POTS syndrome, where, when they stand up suddenly, their heart rate increases and they can feel faint, and their cervical instability, where their neck lacks that normal stability, I think. People who have old fractures, compromised back, 81 with osteoporosis, instructed not to lift more than 15 pounds. These are some of the things that are coming back. These are some of the scenarios. People with maybe muscle wasting disorders, that kind of thing. I mean, you said pretty much no exceptions apart from certain neurological disorders. Are any of them considered exceptions?
Everything you mentioned, I don't think would be a concern. Now, POTS potentially is a concern. But what I think is fascinating and underappreciated with a strength program like this is that so many more things adapt beyond just your muscles. So it's bones, and it is your cardiovascular system. Everything is subjected to the stress when you're under the bar, when you're performing the lift. And so everything is going to change. POTS becomes a concern if you've got dizziness, if you've got a severe fluctuation, blood pressure, you've got fainting. Fainting under the bar is never a good thing. No. And this is where, of course, the guidance of a coach would be extremely valuable. There are almost always modifications that can be done to make the lift safe and effective. So all those other conditions, old fractures, arthritic knees, old back surgeries. We get a lot of stuff with the back. Well, I've got bulging discs, which I always say, congratulations, everybody in this room's got bulging discs. It's not necessarily a source of pain, but a lot of those things do not eliminate you from taking advantage of this program. Now, again, a coach will be able to modify certain movements that may be painful. If we've got arthritic knees, we can look at frequency of squatting, like your parents train twice a week. If somebody walked in the gym who was 25 years old and young and healthy, they're going to train minimum 3 days a week and probably progress to 4. But somebody who's got some of these conditions, maybe is older, they're going to start with 2, and they may only ever do 2 days a week. That gives them plenty of recovery in between. So we can modify frequency, we can modify range of motion, we can modify the progression of load. But what's just really, really cool is somebody who may start 2 days a week, as they get stronger, as they change, as they get in better shape, they may eventually tolerate 3 days a week. Somebody who comes to us with arthritic knees that are really painful and achy and creaky, they train for a couple months, their knees feel a lot better. Now they can squat more often. We had a young woman come to our gym in Texas with osteoporosis. She's like 42, osteopenia. And they started her with very small jumps, 2 pounds at a time. And as she got more confident and she got stronger, then they were able to take bigger jumps. Let's say somebody's got really, really bad knees. Maybe we don't squat, that would be heartbreaking, but maybe we just drop the squat and maybe they deadlift and they press. I've got a woman in the gym right now, can't lay down on the bench because of her back. This is also Merce, 98-year-old Merce, whose video you shared, really kyphotic. She's not going to lay down on a flat bench and tolerate that. So we just don't bench. We press, we do a rack pull, modified deadlift, and we squat with a weighted vest. So we take advantage of as much of the program as we can, and we work around the things that somebody can't do. One of the real common modifications is, instead of deadlifting, we bring the bar up off the floor in the rack and we reduce that
Yes,
range of
which is how
motion.
my mum started.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So, hey, let's put you in the rack and we can creep you back towards the floor. As you get stronger, as you get more confident, you can eventually get down to the floor and pull from there. So, I'm not going to take an 80-year-old and say, hey, go do CrossFit. I think that'd be great for you, right? They're going to be in the hospital pretty quick, probably, right? Starting strength and the lifts that we use and the equipment that we have with our racks and our varied bars and things, we can meet just about anybody where their current ability level is, and we can progress from there. There are no age restrictions, obviously. You know, we got a 98-year-old. That session is we got a bunch of 70-year-olds in there, 60-year-olds.
Young ones,
We do.
youngsters, Chris.
That's exactly right. Yeah. None of those things you rattled off earlier, none of those things would be an absolute no for training. You know, things like, MS, ALS, some sort of a peripheral nerve injury, paralysis, those kinds of things, where the musculoskeletal system will not be able to adapt to stress recovery adaptation normally. Muscle function is not normal. Those are conditions, those are serious conditions where strength training is really not going to have a whole lot of value. We have seen MS patients train simply to try to maintain and slow the rate of progression as much as possible. Again, that's a pretty unique situation. That's going to obviously require some medical management and a knowledgeable coach. But even in those situations, there's a little bit that can be done to try to slow that rate of progression. Outside of that, most orthopedic conditions can be worked around for sure.
Just touching on safety, I mean, there were a lot of comments about safety. So just a couple of examples. Please don't do deadlifts, was somebody said. The discs in your parents' spine are 80 plus years old. We tell people to lift with the knees, not the back, for a reason. A lot of people were concerned with the deadlifting that, my mom was literally going to break her back lifting that. I mean, people discussing the curvature that she had in her spine and not being able to get her back, which she actually improves all the time, but not being able to get her back completely straight.
Yeah.
I had another person say they used to manage a health club. And what I can tell you is that people that age have no business lifting heavy weights over their head or putting it on the back of the neck. No, we do not put it on the back of the neck. But however, that was the perception. The basic theme there is that people fear that they are at risk of injury, lifting weights above their head, even if it's against a rack. What do you say to that?
The body is just incredibly resilient. It's incredibly well adapted to recovering from appropriate levels of stress. And that's really all we're doing. We didn't load up 200 pounds and ask your mom to lift it, right? Like that's how you get hurt. Is that the deadlift's fault? Or is that the loading protocol, right? Or the coach's fault, right? Your mom is going to bend down and pick things up off the floor, whether she comes into the gym or not, right? And that's one of the beauties of these are basic human movements that everybody in the world is going to do these, whether they come in a gym or not. They're extremely safe. Our bodies are well adapted to these movement patterns. And all we're doing is taking the most ergonomic tool that exists, the barbell, and we're loading these basic human movements. And again, if the loading is started at an appropriate level, and is progressed at an appropriate rate, there is zero danger in doing that. You injure your shoulder, you injure your elbow, your knee. A lot of people have a general understanding of, well, I need to strengthen everything around it to provide that joint more support, to provide the injured tissue some more support. So that concept is fairly obvious to a lot of people when you're not talking about the back. But as soon as you start talking about the spine, it's immediately like, I have a bad back. I can't do that. I'm going to hurt myself. And the back is just like every other part of you. There's lots of tissue there that is primed for adaptation to, again, appropriate levels of stress. And so tons of muscles that support your back. Everything about your back, like I mentioned before, all the discs, all the connective tissue, the bones, certainly the muscles, all of that is going to respond to progressive loading. We got a woman who she came to us not a few months ago, and she's like, I'm really scared of the deadlift. My son broke his back deadlifting. And I, of course, we're like, oh gosh, that's horrible. Like, you're not going to do anything like that. We'll go light. We're going to teach you how to do it correctly. And then the more I talked to her, he was a big, tall kid. And as a freshman in high school, they threw him in with the seniors one day and said, you're going to lift with these guys and we're going to do deadlifts. And of course, he's a freshman. He doesn't know any better. He's like, well, I got to try to, I got to try to measure up to these seniors. So I'm going to do what they're doing. He put a weight on the bar. He had no business lifting, none whatsoever. And he hurt himself. So is that the deadlift's fault? I don't think so. It's probably the coaches letting him do something like that, right? There's
Yeah.
just countless examples of things like that. The car is a terribly useful tool to get us around. There's lots of ways to abuse it, and that can be dangerous. The barbell and deadlifts are the exact same way. Extremely valuable, extremely useful. When handled incorrectly, absolutely they can hurt you. But that's like a lot of things. So if I have one exercise to rehab somebody with a sore, injured back, it would be the deadlift. A lot of people are just afraid to load older clients and older patients,
Yeah.
older lifters. The assumption is they're going to break. And
Yes.
again, I think I have certainly seen within starting strength, and I would say even before that, if it's done correctly, they can handle so much more than we give them credit for. Now, again, they've got other considerations with recovery and things like that. Older lifters are much more sensitive to volume. Volume has a tendency to beat them up and make them sore, make their joints sore, make them prone to injury. Lots of high repetition volume is much more detrimental to an older lifter than heavy, but a smaller number of reps and sets. So,
Yeah,
uh,
which is what they're doing.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And of course, the flip side of that is there's a much higher risk to somebody like my mum, the way she was going, where she really is quite active and does all her own cleaning and was reaching up into cupboards and lifting things out of cupboards. And, that strength, that's already becoming better. And therefore, she is becoming safer
absolutely,
because
absolutely.
she's doing these movements in her day to day anyway, reaching down and lifting things. So now she knows how to do that safely and she's stronger. But she fell down the stairs the other day. She fell down a few steps, put her hand down to save herself, so landed awkwardly on her hand. 82 years old, that is a very typical situation for having
Sure.
a fracture.
Uh-huh.
She was absolutely fine. It was a little bit sore, the muscle was a little bit sore for a day. And already we are seeing
That's
signs of
fantastic.
the impact and it's making her safer. So
Yeah.
I don't think we have any qualms about it, particularly with the safety protocols that you put in,
I
building
think
so
I
gradually.
think you're exactly right. Because as we get older, our balance is not as good. Even if we're strong and we're active, we just don't have the same kind of reaction time as we get older. And so falls happen, right? And we say all the time, if you're stronger, and again, it's not, I think everyone focuses on the muscles, which of course get stronger, but everything else gets stronger too. All the connective tissue, all the bones. And so you're much better able to withstand the fall and get up potentially uninjured versus somebody who, yeah, is more frail, not strength training, potentially weaker bones. I mean, you look up the statistics on hip fracture in older adults, the prognosis is not good. So if
Terrible.
you can make
Yeah.
those bones stronger and prevent the fracture altogether, that's a
Yeah.
huge win. And a lot of times, if you're stronger, you're able to catch yourself better, right? So that's an excellent point when you think about not just safety in the gym, but safety outside the gym. Being stronger carries over into everything else she's doing and makes her safer doing it. So that's an excellent point.
We've got a lot of people who, having watched this, either want to do it themselves because, well, I mean, at any age, we should be doing this. They either want to do it themselves or they have a parent like me who they are interested in getting started. Affordability is an issue because we are talking about needing access to a set of equipment and ideally professional coaching. I mean, that's the
Mhm.
ideal way to go. For people who want to get started at home, and I know that, with your own program and so on, it does rely on progressive load. But getting started at home with something like that classic squat, which is just such a game changer, and maybe using something like a vest to add some gradual load, what could people be beginning with at home?
Yeah, I think the squat is probably the most obvious one to start at home. We've got great resources on starting strength on our YouTube channel. You just
I'm going to
search
link them below. Yeah.
yes, starting strength, how to squat. We start everybody when we're teaching the lift. We start everybody without the bar. So just simply watching how the body should move and the things that we're looking at as far as our hip drive and back angle, things like that can absolutely be started at home with nothing. You can use a chair. or a low bench, ottoman, something like that. Even like the second step on a staircase sometimes is a good height, depending on how tall you are. But you can squat down to something that you could sit on if you need to, just like your mom does now. So if you lose your balance or you can't come back up, you just safely sit on the thing that's behind you, and you work on standing up from that height and eventually develop the control to not need to sit. But even without equipment, that's a great thing to get started with. Start to familiarize yourself with the movement pattern. Even without the bar, I think most people are going to see that video and may look at how your mom squats, and that's going to be different than what they're used to thinking of when they think of a squat. A lot of people squat with a very vertical trunk. They're much more upright, and that puts more of the load into the knees. And we want you to bend over more. We want to try to get more of the load onto the hip. It's a joint that's just better tolerates the loading and the repetition much better than knees. So learning some of those things out of the gate with just body weight at home are excellent. And starting to look at videos and familiarize yourself with the technique. That's a great way to get started. And, there's a lot of people, depending on the level that you're starting at, just doing a few sets of squats to a chair may be a good place to start. I think a weighted vest is a relatively inexpensive way to start providing progressive load to the squat. A lot of the vests, we've got a vest that's got 2.5 pound bricks. You can gradually increase the weight brick by brick until over time you're doing your 3 sets of 5 with all the bricks in the vest, again, slowly and gradually over time. Again, things like the deadlift, the bench press, really not a great way to do those without the necessary equipment.
Yeah.
An overhead press, certainly I think reaching up overhead and just being comfortable with reaching overhead. Again, there's lots of variation in shoulder health, shoulder mobility. We are using the rack primarily for your mom. Your dad's kind of there too, but he's not using the rack, I don't think, as much. But your mom, with her shoulder mobility and the kind of the kyphosis in her upper back, the rack provides her some good support. So again, you start to get real quickly on the other lifts. You start to really need that other equipment to be most effective and safe.
Yeah.
I mentioned in our initial conversation, I mentioned the book, Starting Strength Basic Barbell Training. It's a fantastic resource. It's $30. If somebody's really serious about training, they don't have access to a coach, reading the book and understanding what we're doing with this stuff is just an excellent resource. For a lot of people, probably gym membership would be the next thing to consider. So, beyond doing some of the body weight stuff at home, you're probably going to be looking at getting a gym and getting the necessary equipment to really optimize this process.
Just people doing those movements at home, being able to stand up from a chair unassisted and gradually add weight, that's going to really help with falls, I would think, which is the big thing we're also worried about for our older relatives and if we're older ourselves.
Yeah, one quick point on that. We focus a lot on we don't really advocate machine-based training, right? So when you go use a machine at the gym, let's say leg press, for example, which is going to use a lot of the same muscles for the prime movers to do the machine or to do the exercise, you're eliminating any compressive load on the spine and all the muscles of your trunk, but you're also taking balance out of the picture. And so, when you do a squat, whether it's a weighted vest, whether you have a chair behind you or not, or a bar, you've got to balance yourself and you got to control the bar path as you do it. And so there's tons of value there, right? Your balance is going to be trained right along with everything else as the weight on the bar gets heavier and heavier. There's just tons of value for an older adult.
Yeah, so we have a basic barbell setup in our home. We have a rack, as you know, we have a heavier bar and a lighter bar. I can list what we use in the description, and we have a variety of different weights, but crucially the incremental weights, those tiny weights that allow us to go up by a couple of pounds, a pound. We'll be using kilograms, obviously, but those kind of incremental steps that they do week to week. Is that pretty much all you need? And we've got the weighted vest as well for my mum.
You guys have kind of like a cage or a power rack where you've got 4 posts to it, right? You can set a bar up on the inside of it, the outside of it. That's what we have in our gyms. But you can buy a stand, which is just really 2 vertical posts. And then you can buy safeties that will come off of those vertical posts, so you still have the protection of, if you're lifting alone, you've got safeties that can support you or support the bar. Now, one 20-kilo bar is That's all I would need, right? That's all I would use. Some lifters, that's just fine, depending on the strength level, their age coming into this. The lighter bar will obviously be necessary for somebody who's coming in pretty deconditioned, pretty weak. They may not be able to go right to 20 kilos. They may have to start with something lighter. So the good news is if you're just starting out, you're not very strong yet, you don't really have to buy a ton of weights. Just buy enough to get yourself going, give yourself a little bit of a runway, but you don't have to invest in this, enormous set of, thousands of pounds of weights. To your point about the micro plates, that's an extremely important purchase because anybody who's doing something like a press or a bench press is going to be making jumps that are smaller than like maybe 2 kilograms or 5 pounds. So the micro plates are useful there. But again, older, deconditioned lifter, absolutely all the lifts across the board, you're going to need the ability to make these small incremental jumps. So I think just to give some perspective on like my own journey through understanding strength training and sort of where I'm at today, right? I started life as a distance runner. I ran cross country track. I ran in middle school. I ran in high school. I ran collegiately 4 years. I did a lot of marathons and a lot of running after that, probably up until I was about 32. I was the guy who was 160 pounds, very weak, thought I was strong because I ran, thought my legs were strong, really didn't understand anything about how to get strong. And so it was a long process of trial and error, being in the gym, doing things that didn't work, didn't see any results, didn't see any real changes in how I looked and how I felt and the weight that I was lifting. I did a lot of things wrong before I found what I'm doing now. And it was immediate how I saw progress in the weights I was lifting, how I felt, and how I looked. And so I've been down all these other roads, and I can speak from experience, they don't work. So I went from a 160 pound marathoner to, 230 pounds and, among the strongest guys in the gym. So I've made that. I didn't start as a weightlifter. I didn't start as a big football player who was naturally strong. And I think a lot of people assume when they see somebody who's really strong in the gym, they just kind of assume they've always been that way. They're just naturally strong.
Can I ask how old you are now, Chris?
43.
Yeah. So still a young thing, but I'm guessing you feel a lot stronger at 43 than you did at 23.
Now I feel like my joints hurt significantly less than they did, 15 or 20 years ago. I feel like I'm on a much more sustainable path where I can age and I can keep doing things I want to do. I feel like physically I'm not limited really in any sense. And again, I don't know that I would have been able to say that if I had continued running. And I think we tend to see a lot of runners that are kind of broken down and pretty beat up as they get older. Running is very hard on our bodies. And endurance sports like running, it's very catabolic, right? It's breaking down and using energy. And as we get older, the process of aging becomes much more catabolic as well. And so those two things together, that can be pretty difficult and can lead to some, not terribly great outcomes. But if you're doing something like training for strength, which is very anabolic, right? Build up and growth, along with the catabolic nature of aging, they kind of balance each other out, I think. And so, who's to say where I'd be now? But I feel healthier. I feel better, being stronger. Walking around at 230 pounds as opposed to being 26 again and being a 155 pound runner. So.
Well, I think that's a pretty good place to finish. There was just a final thing I wanted to ask, people asking about, well, should they be stretching? Is that something they should add in? Obviously, with the unweighted warm-ups, that is kind of a stretch. When you're doing an unweighted squat, that's a big stretch in there as well. And, when we're lifting just above our heads, pressing above our heads with just a very light weight, that could be interpreted as a stretch. I mean, is that enough, or would you also recommend that people do go out and do stretches and other forms of exercise?
No stretching.
Okay.
This is
interesting.
This is I joke a lot in our sessions. I make my lifters put $1 in the jar in the back if they mention yoga or stretching. I don't actually.
This is going to unleash the gates of hell.
Bring it. Yeah, stretching has been elevated to this mythical status, and it's just flat out a waste of time. Rarely, if ever, in everyday life are we limited by our lack of flexibility, right? If you're trying to stand up out of a chair, what you need is strength. You don't need to be more flexible. You need to be stronger. Many, many times, and physical therapists are at the top of the list for this problem, a lack of strength is misinterpreted as a lack of flexibility. So for example, if you're trying to teach somebody how to squat and they go down halfway and they stop and they come back up, a lot of people are going to say, well, maybe it's ankle mobility, or maybe their hamstrings are too tight and that's why they can't go lower. Their brain has said, I can't control any lower. I will fall if I go lower. I'm going to stop right here. And so there are many, many examples of a lack of strength is really the problem, and it's misinterpreted as a lack of flexibility. You hit the nail on the head. When we do a body weight squat or an empty bar squat to full depth, that is as much flexibility as we need. When we stretch overhead, when we press overhead, and we reach full lockout with full elevation, what other stretching is necessary? We've used the shoulder through the largest functional range of motion that we can. What else is there? What else do we need, right? Though these lifts, again, basic human movements performed through. Now, again, this would be a situation you're talking somebody moving these lifts through the full range of motion, kind of the ideal, the parent lift, full range of motion, overhead press, full range of motion, full depth on the squat, a deadlift off the floor. There really isn't a need for flexibility beyond that. I can't really think there's isolated situations. If you're a ballerina, you probably got to get into situations that those lifts are not going to cover. Makes perfect sense. But the vast majority of any flexibility needed for everyday life is covered when you perform the lifts correctly. Stretching is passively taking a muscle or a joint into an end range position. And oftentimes when we get injured, and again, the assumption is, oh, well, a sprinter pulls his hamstring, he wasn't flexible enough. And it's not the case, right? What's happening is the hamstring is getting lengthened as he tries to take that next stride, and then it has to contract forcefully in that lengthened position. And that's why it gets injured. It's not strong and competent in that position. So when you do passive stretching, all you're doing is you're conditioning your nervous system to be okay with that position, but you are not making yourself strong and competent and safe in that position. When you do a deadlift, for example, you are lengthening the hamstring quite a bit to get all the way down to the floor and get set in the right position. So not only is the hamstring long, it's then forced to work from that position and get progressively stronger from that position. So it has both the lengthening quality and the strength in that position. So many, many times injuries are blamed on, I should have been stretching more, I wasn't flexible enough. It's almost never the case. It's almost always a lack of strength and control and capacity in that position. We got members that like to do yoga, and that's perfectly fine. I'm not ragging on yoga. However, the biggest problem with things like that and stretching and other types of, like, I might even throw Pilates into this mix. It takes away from what people should really be spending their time on, or it in their minds, it's, well, I'm doing Pilates and I'm feeling tired and sore afterwards, so I must be getting stronger. That's enough. Same thing with yoga. It's not the same thing as progressively loading with weight. It's not strength training. It's not going to be as effective for long-term strength training. And there's all kinds of mental health benefits. I mean, yoga, I think for some is very meditative. That's fantastic. There's no downside to it. Again, other than distracting you from maybe what you should be doing. It's not going to hurt you, but it's certainly not going to make you strong and resilient and protect you from injury and improve balance. None of those things are really going to happen to a great degree with a lot of stretching protocols. I mean, I don't do any stretching outside of the empty bar warm-ups with the lifting. And I've suffered zero consequences. Now, obviously, I'm one person, but it's not a good use of our time. If we're spending, a lot of us have a limited amount of time to train, be in the gym. Stretching is the last thing I'd be doing.
I feel like I do just need to jump in defense slightly of yoga and Pilates, in that, if that's all people are doing at the moment, I have seen that it is a good way to use your body strength alone to build some muscle. I have seen people build quite a bit of strength by doing Pilates, for example, where they're using their body weight in not just stretches, but, in various movements where they're sort of having to hold themselves and planking and all that kind of thing. So it's definitely better than doing nothing. I wouldn't want to get that message doubled up. But what you're talking about is optimal strength. If you want to optimize your strength.
In order to get significantly stronger, you've got to have an exercise and a protocol that allows for loading that can continue to occur, progressive loading that can continue to occur for a long period of time. With these lifts and with our incremental plates, we can add weight to your deadlift for decades, literally for decades. It will go now. It slows down. You're right. You're not going to add a whole bunch of weight in year 10. Week by week, it's going to be a very, very slow process. And at that point, this is a different conversation, but you're looking at maybe trying to add weight every 6 to 8 weeks, maybe even 12 weeks, something like that. But the point is that you can make those lifts get stronger little by little over a long, long, long period of time. When you look at isolation work, when you look at other kinds of exercise, you have to be looking for, well, how do I progress the difficulty of this exercise? Not just in altering the position, difficulty in load. Because load and moving more weight is the definition of strength and a definition of getting stronger. A plank is a fantastic example. If you can hold a plank for 30 seconds, as you increase time holding the plank, you're not really getting stronger. Your body is better able to tolerate the metabolic situation that you're in when you're trying to hold a plank. That's not making your muscles contract harder against a heavier load in order to get stronger. It's really more of a conditioning effect of you getting more tolerant of that position and your muscles better able to tolerate the metabolic situation of just staying in that position. You go from 30 seconds to a minute to 2 minutes. Yes, you'll get a little bit stronger, but how far do you take that, right? Are you going to hold a plank for an hour, for 3 hours, for 4 hours? Where does it end, right? Now, you can add weight to your back and you can hold that position. But, again, that's not a very convenient way to do it. Most other things out there, whether it be machines or other types of programs, other exercise, they might move the needle initially for a little while, but they're going to plateau very quickly and there will be no additional strength gain. Then you're just burning calories and you might as well be cutting the grass or something.
Well, you don't hold back there, Chris, now. Just tell us what you think. No.
Well, there's an awful lot of
you know what? It makes
misconceptions out
sense.
there.
It does make sense. From somebody who sat in a gym for a year and didn't really make much progress at all. Now, I didn't have a trainer. I was just really using the individual machines.
I was there too. I was that same guy doing the same thing. Yeah, I was there too.
Yeah, I haven't made half the progress that I have just in a couple of months with lifting these weights and adding a little bit every week. Incredible. Chris, thank you so much.
Of course,
I really appreciate your time. And we'll look forward to checking in for my mum and dad's next session.
That's great. Awesome.
So clearly, Chris feels strongly that a strength training program involving progressively loaded training is the best way to gain strength as we age, and we were keen for him to share tips and inspiration for how to get started. We talked about the value of everyone learning to squat and doing those regularly, so I'll link to the video Chris mentioned showing us how to do that below. And for those who can't access a gym, coaching or equipment, I'll also link in the description to some additional exercises for starting to build strength and restoring posture at home from physical therapist and strength coach Chris Reis, who recently appeared on this channel and shared some brilliant fitness, wellness and longevity tips. So that conversation is also linked below. And my mum and dad are just so touched by the outpouring of support for them as they aim to rebuild their strength. And it's also incredibly moving for me to see as their daughter, because you can imagine just how proud I am of them for doing this and for spreading hope that it's not too late to get stronger. So keep an eye out for more updates in this series, and a reminder, it's linked below. And to help you keep up with my content, you'll also find a link to sign up to my free monthly newsletter, rounding up all the latest episodes and articles from me around how to age well, look and feel better for longer, both here and on my website, honest.scot. But for now, thanks for being here today.